And for more on this, let's bring in John Hanna. He's a former national security advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney and senior counselor at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. So, John, apparently, predictably brazen again. That is Iran's behavior. Does this escalate, or do you think they'll pull it back?
Well, I think right now we're on a road to further escalation, Eric. I think in particular these firings on U.S. military drones is a major new development that so far has been unconfirmed by the U.S. government. But it's one thing to be attacking foreign oil tankers off the Straits of Hormuz. It's a whole nother ballgame to be attacking U.S. military assets directly, even unmanned systems. So I think this type of thing probably requires a much more forceful U.S. response.
What would that forceful U.S. response be? You know, in September of 2016, during the campaign, President Trump, at a speech in Florida, was talking about all those Iranian boats, the small, swift crafts that are like gnats and mosquitoes that swarm around our Navy assets. And at that time, he said that we should, quote, shoot them out of the water. Do you think that something similar to that could be the reaction here?
I certainly think if the Iranians are going to be attacking the U.S. military directly, then that's a whole nother ballgame. And I think that unless you put a stop to that early and quickly, the way President Reagan did to the IRGC Navy back in 1988, putting half of its Navy boats to the bottom of the Gulf, and put a stop to the Iranian challenge to American shipping immediately. If you don't do that, this is only going to escalate further, and we'll have further provocations from the Iranians where they're beginning to come after American military personnel, not just military assets.
Yeah, well, look, they basically got to kidnap some of our personnel a few years ago when they took them off a boat that was disabled. You refer to the 1988 incident. That was the Samuel Adams, I think, a frigate, hit an Iranian mine, and 4 days later, President Reagan did what you just said, sunk half the Navy. But now it's a far more sophisticated, different military power. You have the IRGC. This could potentially explode, critics fear, into a much broader conflict. And others are saying we just don't have the forces in the region to take on Iran.
Listen, that's possible, although as we've seen over the last month, the United States has been augmenting its forces in this part of the world quite dramatically, and there's now talk that General McKenzie at CENTCOM is requesting another 6,000 troops, perhaps 2 additional fighter squadrons, some more anti-ballistic missile defenses. So the United States is quite capable of inflicting a very, very heavy price on Iran, in addition to everything that we can still do to isolate them diplomatically, hit them economically, and as well as covert operations, particularly in terms of cyber warfare. But we've got to make sure that the Iranians don't get comfortable in that sweet spot, that gray zone of being able to attack American interests with violence, but just beneath the threshold of the kind of activity that would automatically trigger an American military response. Because if we allow that to happen without imposing real price on the Iranians, this will just lead to precisely the kind of war that we're seeking to avoid so badly.
What if the others say, look, it's a drone, they can shoot it. Drones, you're not dealing with human life there. But that could now cause a new policy that we escort these tankers. The U.S. Navy protects them like we did during the 1980s, during the so-called tanker wars.
I think that's certainly an option if you've got enough ships in the area that you can do that. Otherwise, I think you've got to do what we should be doing anyway, which is getting Gina Haspel, apolitical CIA senior officials, as well as our top military brass, over to Europe, over to the Arabian Gulf, over to Japan and Asia, to get them actually participating in something like a naval escort, getting their ships engaged here as well. So it's a true international response that isolates the Iranians and lets them know that they are not going to be allowed to get away with this kind of activity that threatens the oil of the entire world, that fuels the entire global economy, with impunity.
And finally, the international community is now speaking out against this. Britain, of course, France and others, as well as our Arab Sunni allies. Do you think that coalition should include the UAE and other states that are in the region to send Tehran a blunt and lasting message?
Of course, everybody's got to be involved. All of our top Asian allies, the Europeans, the Russians, and the Chinese. Chinese have a huge stake in keeping the Straits of Hormuz open, keeping a lid on the price of oil. They've got to have some skin in this game, too, if they don't want to see a catastrophic war that will send the price of oil through the roof. We've all got to get together and make it absolutely clear to the mullahs in Tehran that they're not going to be able to play this game with the world community and the global economy.
It certainly seems, because of the tougher sanctions, that Tehran is running scared. John Hanna, the Foundation of the Defense of Democracies, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Eric.